Hello YouTubers, very excited to take a look at Mad Max Fury Road 2015, starring Tom Hardy, Charlize Theron, Nicholas Hoult, and directed by George Miller. I suppose needless to say, I was a huge fan of the first three, as most people were. I think the very idea of apocalyptic worlds just captures everyone's imagination, and we all find this possibility terribly gripping. This movie takes place in the heart of the despair of this apocalyptic land, much like where we saw left off in Beyond the Thunderdome. Resources are at a minimum. Some semblance of communities have started to develop, although their methods remain rather savage in nature. The movie basically takes place on the road that is the title, Fury Road, and the action ensues up and down this road, and the time just flies by as you don't really have time to think too much about storyline because you're being bombarded with creative and artistic action scenes throughout the whole movie. As you would expect, audiovisuals are a major part of this particular film. The roller coaster ride starts at the opening credits and does not stop until the end of the movie. The quality of the CGI is top-notch. The invented weapons and methods of attack in this movie are phenomenal. And just as you're soaking in what happened in one action scene, you're being hit with the next. I would like to talk a little bit about some of the camera shots that I found way too close for a 3D movie. There is quite a few zoom-in shots, and if you're watching something in 3D, especially in a theater, it's going to make you dizzy, or you're going to miss certain aspects or details that's happening within the scene. Having said that, the 3D film really does offer a great amount of depth and almost puts you into the film. I always love how you seem to have these roid case bad guys running around when there's no food or proper drugs to provide these types of bodies, but nonetheless, they're cool to look at. Although I would say they went a little bit too far with the white makeup all over most of the disciples, although the film itself really did shed any form of realism, whereas the first three, at least you had a sense that there was some possibility of some of this happening. This particular film just throws that right out the window. Let's jump right in with meat on the bone. This movie is a nice steak, not only in the sense that you yourself as the viewer can think about where you would be, what decisions you would make, how you view an apocalyptic world, but there's so much artistic thought put into this movie, you almost don't have to do any of that thinking. It's all given to you. Having said that, the high-paced action of this movie almost brings it to a fault at some points because you don't get that chance to sit and think about your own thoughts on the world and trying to develop feelings for the characters or relationships in the movie. As in the originals, there was a lot more downtime in the films, so you had a little bit more time to develop understanding of characters. So they relied upon charming scenes with Mel Gibson. You want to move your guzzling, you talk to me. As opposed to this movie where we don't really get that much from Max. In fact, at times, I felt like I was watching more of Bane from Batman than I was Mad Max.
I'll need all the supplies I can carry.
And by the way, the lines of Mad Max have been very much skewed in this movie. If you do just a bit of Googling, you'll find a lot of different theories on who you're actually watching when you watch this movie, which I kind of like because there are some dissimilarities, namely the fact that he's having flashbacks to his daughter, and we all know that from the very first movie he actually has a son. And there's actually much more inconsistencies than that, which gives some depth to the film in terms of, as a viewer, you can sit and think about where they're coming from on this storyline. And if you are an avid fan of the first three films, there will be plenty of throwback moments for you and small details for you to pick up on that directly relate to the first few films. Which leads us right into the believability content, and this movie requires a full glass of Kool-Aid and then some. The other movies, originals, obviously needed some sort of suspension of disbelief, but at least there was some sort of realism embedded into it where you could see something like that happening. Not so much with this movie, especially when you look at the type of tools that were used and wondering how they could have possibly developed these tools without proper shops, without proper resources. The method in which they provided their attack, they really brought you out of the world of realism in this movie. Not to mention my favorite part with a world that lacks gasoline, that you would really need a guitar player while you're doing your attack that just spits out fire, burning up all that precious resources so that you can hear some rock and roll while you murder people. Cheese factor in this movie is relatively clean. I'd say we only get a little bit of cheese whiz with the so-called relationships that begin to develop, mainly because there's really no reason for them to. They're just kind of jammed into this situation where they need to accept each other. And by the way, that's one of the character differences with this Max character, the way he accepts the new relationship so easily and without really any impetus that I feel like was valid. He just seems to be a little bit nicer than the Mad Max we all became accustomed to. Having said that, it was relatively painless, and there was so much action jammed in this movie, there was no room for cheese. As an overall rating for this movie, I definitely think you need to go to the theater to watch it. It's a big screen type of movie. It's shot in 3D, meant to be jumping out at the screen at you, as well as providing a great deal of depth. The quality of the movie is good enough to go watch just in regular HD in a theater. It's exciting. The action is nonstop. This is theater worthy. Overall, for all you Mad Max fans out there, you're going to have fun. It's going to be exciting. You're going to get a lot of throwback moments. There will be a little bit to be desired with storyline, just because the pace of this movie is so fast. There's not a lot of time to develop a real storyline. I'm hoping that they make another one where we get to have a little more information about what happened in this world and what's going to be done to fix it. But speaking of apocalyptic movies, there have been tons over the years. What's your favorite? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to like or subscribe. Thanks for watching.